Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares and post them online for fun. I've got another time lapse here. This one's continuing the adventure of my little monkey avatar character. I made a piece before with him visiting like a Game Boy city. I'll link to that somewhere in this video if you haven't seen it. And I really like the look of that piece, so I just thought it'd be fun to explore like another location. I got this idea that he could be visiting some kind of a food stand or like a merchant in a jungle kind of city. But then also because I like making sci-fi stuff, I wanted to dress it up a bit with a sci-fi theme. And just thought that the contrast between like an organic jungle look and technical sci-fi stuff could be pretty cool. Since this is a continuation in the series, I kept a lot of parameters the same. Like, in fact, if you notice, I actually just copied over the original Game Boy City piece, just to make sure everything was framed the same, like where the sidewalk is and then the bordering of the whole piece in general. The overall canvas here is 200 by 200 pixels, and the artwork within the border is 160 by 144. The previous piece used a color palette inspired by the iconic Game Boy look with only 4 shades of green, but for this one I wanted to open up the color a bit and just have like a more colorful piece overall. But to keep it looking stylistically similar to the other one, I started by just converting that 4-color green Game Boy palette into black and white, and then use those black and white shades to make this piece. But for now I just started by building the focal point of the piece, like the food stand itself, and played around with the architecture to find something really simple that just has a bit of interest as well. I wanted this to have a feel that it was from an actual game, so the ground I tried to create with a sort of repeating tile look, and have it be very stylized. I created some rough texture for the grass and then just copy-pasted it along the ground at regular intervals. For the soil, I decided to go with like a wavy pattern. Like, I kind of like how in retro games they use like really simple patterns like this to convey the material, in this case the soil, and you still understand what it is just based on the context. Coming back to the building, the next step was just to decorate the plain walls with some details that sort of reinforced that sci-fi angle I was going for. So I put in a sign at the top with like an antenna and a wire. There's like some vents and pipes and paneling and that sort of stuff. And then I dropped in an arcade machine next to the place, which I mean, that's not really sci-fi specific, but it is sort of technical, I guess. And also it's just kind of fun and at least works in having this food stand be like a kind of cool place to hang out at, I guess. Then I added like a crate of bananas next to it because I decided to call this place the Banana Star Grill and have it sort of be this like banana-centric kind of food stand. It just seemed kind of fun and fitting for like a sci-fi jungle location, and also almost something you'd expect to see like as a stop along the way of the world map, like in Donkey Kong Country or something like that. I mean, I guess minus the sci-fi theme, but still. For the interior of the stand, I just tried to rough out something that could resemble an oven or a grill, and I knew I'd have some kind of gorilla character up front anyway, so I didn't really know at this point how much of the interior would be obscured anyway. And to keep the focus on the character interacting at the food stand, I just placed a solid wall in the background so that there was nothing busy to compete for that focus. I pictured the main sign of this stand have the name Banana Star Grill spelled out across the top. So I spaced out some letters, but with this low resolution I couldn't really find a good way to spell out the entire name in like a decent size that also looks interesting. So I just decided to scrap that idea and go with a kind of fun looking logo to represent the brand itself. I came up with this idea of like a very angular bee that also has a banana on the other half of it. And together it kind of creates this like 5 points of a star sort of look, right? Can you kind of see that, hopefully? I mean, it's probably a little hard to read off of this at this low resolution, but I hope it comes out clean enough. It just sort of creates like a fun sort of fast food branding within this world. To finish off the midground of this piece, I topped off that back wall with a row of bushy leaves. Again, I tried to take the approach of designing just some kind of repeatable tile that I could copy-paste along the wall. Not that I'm trying to cut corners here by just making copy-paste graphics, but I think it helps like give it that retro game feel, you know? Yeah, let's just go with that. They use tiles, it's okay. For the foliage line work, it kind of helped to stick to like triangular or diamond kind of shapes in the line work, and then I used extra pixels on the outline to give those like some extra hang to the leaves. Does that make sense? Like, to sort of have it terminate towards a smaller point and show a bit of direction of them hanging. I tried a bit of light rendering with like a highlight, but ended up liking the look of it just being a solid color. And after all, it's just a bit of a background element anyway, so it doesn't really need to have super complex shading. And the overall art style here is pretty clean and simple anyway. After I guess what I would call success with the bushes, I decided to branch out with the foliage stuff, pun definitely intended, and I decided to make some vines that are kind of wrapping around the light pole in the building itself. I don't think I've ever done vines before, but my method here was just to lay out like a flowing line using 1 pixel width. And then in Photoshop, I selected the layer and expanded the selection by 1 pixel just to drop an outline around everything. So essentially you end up with a single line that kind of has a black border on either side of it. Then I finished them off by cleaning up the line work and adding a bit of shading and decorating with a few leaves here and there. I also did the thing again of adding extra singular pixels to the outlines just to convey maybe smaller leaves or sort of a thorny texture to the vines. With those major elements solidified, I moved on to the background to see like what space was left over and just filled it with kind of a simple city skyline that also had some palm trees placed around, just, to be sort of jungly, I guess. Sometimes to make a simple skyline, I drop in like a flat color and then just cut chunks out of it to leave rectangles at different heights. You could always just drop in different size rectangles from the start, but for me, I think it helps like randomize it a bit more when I approach it by deleting pixels from a shape. I also created a checkerboard pattern out of one of the lighter tones. When you're doing a piece that has limited colors like this, you can essentially create a new shade this way. You do have to be careful how you use it though, because it can be kind of hard on the eyes to register that kind of pattern across smaller items in the piece. Like if you were to color a character's face with that sort of checkerboard pattern, it probably wouldn't read cleanly at all. But using it as additional shading or texture on a flat wall or background usually works out really well. When I'm making a full scene piece like this, I like filling out most of the available space, so I just kind of do laps around the piece and look for open gaps. And then just fill them out with random things like signs and mechanical doodads or like bits and bobs, whatever you want to call it. Just additional details that reinforce whatever theme you're going for. For the guy working at the grill, I wanted him to be a gorilla and have sort of like stylistically be similar to my avatar character. So I just copied over the avatar head and then played around a little bit to change it up some more. I ended up calling the new guy Grilla, which I thought was pretty clever and like funny in sort of a lame way since he's a gorilla that grills stuff on a grill. I love in games when the NPCs are just so casual and ready to help you too, like where they're just sort of like, hey pal, check out what I got for sale kind of attitude. So I worked them out to be just kind of like leaning on the counter with that sort of casual vibe, and I ended up animating this piece as well, so I'll share that at the end just to show like the full dialogue and action of my avatar like ordering food from this place and interacting with this guy. And lastly, I just did a quick look around to finish off some more detailing, like the interior of the food stand. And I added a flower because I wanted to animate like a little dancing, bobbing flower, because that's always funny when games have little environmental details like that. And also finished off some of the signage. And then finally we get to coloring. So prior to making this piece, I had done a series of like evil fruit-themed mech characters. And for those, I had been using colors that were selected from the original NES palette, like the limited palette from the original Nintendo system. For one of those characters in particular, I'd stumbled upon this awesome combination of like yellow, orange, green, and purple that I really loved. And it had this really awesome tropical feel to it, so I just brought in those color selections from that piece and used it as the basis for this one, since I thought it'd be like a good fit here as well. So what you see me do here is continually flip between black and white and the colored look, just to make sure that the colors I'm selecting from that palette match the original contrast that I laid out for this piece. So for example, the yellow is a pretty light color, so it works well for most of the areas that were defined in that light gray, whereas like the purpley ones tend to be like a mid to darker color, so it ends up working well for those dark areas. This is what's known as color value, like the fact that a color can appear bright or dark to the eye. It's a really important part of mastering color use and making sure that the colors that you pick are given enough contrast in the piece. I'm not sure how this would work in other programs, but if you happen to work in Photoshop like I do and you want to set up this black and white value filter, all you have to do is make a new layer and then fill it with all black, like the default 100% black value. And then you set the blending mode to the color option. In this time lapse, the layer that you see is named layer 21. Like normally I give it a cool name like value check or something like that, but not this time I guess. Anyway, it's a useful way to sort of check the color contrast of your piece. Okay, sorry, probably talked about value for way too long there, but it is an important step. You might even say it's valuable. Okay, sorry, I'll show myself out soon. But also I did want to just mention like about color range within a limited color piece like this. Like this piece ends up being I think only about 6 colors overall, including the really light and like the black tone. So to get a wide color range, you have to do a really strong hue shift for stuff that's going to be like shade colors of your main tones. Like rather than going with like yellow and dark yellow for the building, it should become yellow and then like vibrant purple for the shading. Similarly with the plants, rather than doing like green and dark green, it becomes like green and vibrant blue for the shading. This way the eye is now looking at 4 hues of color, being like yellow, green, blue, and purple, rather than just 2. It provides like a really wide range of colors. Obviously it's not necessary for every case, but it definitely fits the fun and vibrant look of this art style anyway. Alright, so this is the end here. I'm going to flip over to the animated version now so you can check out the final form of this piece. So thank you for watching and take care and keep it square.